Is this the complete end of suffering possible? Not just insight into suffering or acceptance of it, but the full and permanent cessation of all trauma, even deeply ingrained complex trauma. And ultimately, is full enlightenment actually possible? Not as a lofty ideal, but as something that can be realized by Westerners living ordinary modern lives. In our Sangha, we believe it is, because we're now seeing the fruits of the path. Amrita Baba, founder and head teacher of Amrita Mandala, has spent the last 18 years laying out and testing these methods, and in November of last year completed the path himself, the final and permanent cessation of both subtle bodies, the full realization of enlightenment. Shortly afterwards, two students, Kripa and Sangita, have also completed the path and reached the end of suffering, who are two mothers who have children to look after and jobs to go to, thereby demonstrating the validity of a path that can be learned and practiced and will deliver the final fruits for regular people. Many people think enlightenment is something vague, mystical, or endlessly ongoing, or practitioners attain some lower stage of awakening or emptiness insight and believe that to be enlightenment. Those recognitions can be stable, profound, and genuinely liberating, but they're not the end of the path. The reasons this matters is simple. Many sincere practitioners awaken, gain deep insight, and yet the root of suffering has not been fully removed. Something remains unresolved. In Amrita Mandala, we take a pragmatic approach to enlightenment. We treat it as a path with observable stages and definable completion. At this point, 23 practitioners in our system have realized emptiness of mind, what we consider as the Mahamudra stage of completion of lesser one taste. And 3 have now completed greater one taste, the full realization of enlightenment. Enlightenment occurs in the subtle bodies, when both subtle energy bodies have been fully purified of all karmic obscurations, samskaras, the causal body, culminating in emptiness realization, and the astral body, composed of meridian channels, whose purification leads to the complete cessation of the 5 Kleshas, the afflictions, ignorance, attachment, aversion, pride, and jealousy, which includes the ending of all traumas and all emotional friction and habitual reactive patterns. The essential point is this: the stages of awakening and enlightenment are not vague or purely interpretive. They can be known with certainty and mapped clearly. What ultimately matters here isn't belief in some esoteric ideas, but whether a path produces stable, producible, perfect freedom from suffering. So this episode gets to the heart of the Amrita Mandala path: why awakening or emptiness alone is not the end, how trauma and karmic residue persist beyond insight, and what it actually means to complete the path to Buddhahood, potentially within in years rather than decades or lifetimes. This conversation also marks the beginning of the Enlightened Westerner Series, a continuation of the Mahasiddha interviews that we published on this podcast 3 or 4 years ago, linked below, where we will explore in a very down-to-earth way what full enlightenment looks like when realized by ordinary modern men and women living ordinary modern lives. So we place this discussion firmly in the tradition of pragmatic Dharma, openly discussing lived experience, results, and completion, just as many masters of the past did, rather than keeping enlightenment something vague, romanticized, or abstract. If you find this kind of grounded, open exploration of the path is valuable to you, please like, subscribe, and share. It genuinely helps these conversations reach people who are sincerely looking for the end of suffering. So, Baba, thank you for joining me. So, for some background, last summer I went to stay with Baba for 6 weeks in his ashram. This was just 3 months before his enlightenment. This felt like the culmination of many years of hard work putting the path of Amrita Mandala together. Towards the end of his retreat months, that he dedicated some serious effort to finishing this. You were at a stage where you weren't entirely sure when the end of the path would be. It has been very beautiful to see you finish this path, to finally validate the path you have so meticulously put together. And a great shift in you. I've seen a great shift in you, which to me is clearly striking. There is a very significant change I've seen, and it's lovely to see you be rewarded with the fruits of your life's work. Recently, Baba visited Hugging St. Amar, and Amar gave her blessings for Amrita Mandala and the teachings. Baba also got back not too long ago from a visit to Thailand to meet Kamala Rinpoche, the Khandro of the late Chakchul Rinpoche, where they're in the process of recognition of Baba as a Turtan, a treasure revealer, and his attainment. So more about this later. So we're going to get into many things in this episode, but first I want to focus on what has your experience been, and to ask you, is this truly the end of suffering?
That was a brilliant introduction. I mean, it was
Okay.
brilliant, like a condensed version of what we do in Amrita Mandala and what pragmatic Dharma is about, and so on. So, yes, definitely.
I think you've just gone slightly fuzzy.
Oh, you mean the sound? Oh,
Your face.
okay, my face is fuzzy. Let's unfuzz it.
There we go.
Yes, so we've discussed this in many episodes of this podcast. You know, many since we started this podcast with Simha in 2017, which is 9 years ago almost. We've discussed enlightenment through the different stages in utmost detail, and not merely theoretically, but very practically as we can discuss about the topic. So it's like a pretty long study, pretty long story. You know, I don't remember which number of the podcast this episode is, something 20 something, but we've done, well, it's not that many episodes, but it's like if it's 20-30 hours of listening, immense amount of effort and practice has gone into making these episodes and being able to present Dharma in this completely practical perspective, which means from first-hand experience. So, you know, you mentioned something that I have, something that is really basic teaching in Buddhism and that were taken from the Hindus by the Buddhists. It's the Pancha-Klesha theory, the 5 poison theory, which means that there is self-delusion or ignorance, avidya klesha, and then there are the other 4, which is, you just listed them: greed, jealousy, attachment, aversion. So which in four concept, it summarizes all kinds of selfishness and negativity. So it's not literally like greed, jealousy, aversion, attachment, although aversion and attachment are big ones, but it just kind of outlines this functioning of the ego, of the selfish functioning of the mind. And so Pancha-Klesha, the theory of 5 poisons is something very simple, something very basic. And so for many years, my work, my teachings, and my practice was about this avidya klesha, this klesha of ignorance, this, in common terms, dualistic delusion that is created by the notion of separate self or selfing. So for many years, that was the main focus, and we call it that side of practice. You know, this is the main area of Buddha Dharma. We speak about vipassana, emptiness, shunyata. We speak about sutra vipassana, tantra vipassana, and that is like realizing this emptiness of all phenomena is the main thing in Buddhism. And in Amrita Mandala we call this the path of wisdom and clarity. We have separate set of practices for just that purpose. But all this emptiness wisdom, it is just to remove the klesha of ignorance, the klesha of selfing, self-based existence. So that is only one of the kleshas. Okay? And then the other four are, in different Vajrayana systems, they only say that when we speak of the klesha of ignorance, they speak that it's mind related, that emptiness is realized in the mind. They use the term mind. In Amrita Mandala, we call it the causal body, the subtler of the two subtle bodies, right? And then the other four kleshas in different Vajrayana systems, all the internal yogas, they have the mind category, and then they have the subtle body category. In Amrita Mandala, we call it causal body and astral body. But the other four kleshas, so only one of them is in this mind emptiness area, and the other four are related to this subtle body, or like we call it in Amrita Mandala, meridian system or astral body. So there is lot more material to work through with the astral body side. And something that we have discussed in this podcast is traumatization, psychological trauma, developmental trauma, complex trauma. We did a long episode, was it last year, about this. So, and then we also did, was it 1 or 2 episodes of the purification of the astral body and physical body. There was this light body episodes we did maybe a couple of years back. But what I'm getting to is well, we'll get into it in more detail, but it's quite a big task and has been for me, as the head teacher and founder of this method to, I've been immensely blessed to be guided by my gurus, my Mahasiddha gurus, who are non-physical masters, such as Padmasambhava here. But I didn't get ready answers. They only just kind of gave me clues, sometimes practices, do this. But what I mean by clues is that, work with that, figure out what is going on with this or that thing. And then I had to do a lot of practice to figure out how the ins and outs, how everything works. So I've done that, and finally after this, I've been a full-time teacher this is my 18th year. I've been a full-time practitioner for over 23 years, and 10 years out of those 23 I spent in retreat. So a lot of effort has gone into this, and I'm just telling all this for the listeners to understand that, a lot of work and effort of myself and also my students, like yourself, like my ordained students, has gone into this. And something that you mentioned in your introduction, which is very important, is that the results from that very first awakening experience, followed by many other awakening experience into the empty nature of mind, and also healing of trauma, opening of the subtle body / astral body, these results we now know are repeatable. So in that sense, this is very important, that it's not only me who has come to who has turned the 5 poisons into 5 wisdoms and thus put an end to samsara, but also my students have. So you mentioned Kripa and Sangita. We have some materials from them already on our Amrita Mandala YouTube, but there's also Simha, Amrita Simha, who is now in his trial period. We have this when there is cessation of the causal body, or attainment of wisdom emptiness, or cessation of astral body, which means cessation of subtle body. We have this trial period of 3 weeks, meaning that the cessation has to last for 3 weeks for us to know that it is really permanent shift. So now Simha also, he's 1 week into the trial period, but I was talking to him yesterday and it looks stable. So I would bet my money for it to be a permanent shift. But my point is that the results are repeatable, and this is of course the whole point of a awakening method, the method of enlightenment. They should always be kind of like factory line, that it gives the same result for everybody. And that's what Amrita Mandala is all about. So your question was?
What is have you experienced the end of suffering?
Definitely, yes, definitely. There is more to say about that, but coming back to those 5 kleshas, the 5 kleshas are no more. I'm 46 years old now. I'm 47 next month. So for all this time until November 2025, throughout my life, I have suffered. I have been confused. My experience has been split. Very strong sense of me, very strong negativity, doubt that develop into so much negativity and cynicism, and this classical somebody who has complex trauma that I had. Complex trauma over decades. By the time you're 40 and 50, it's very, the negativity and the cynicism, it's very strong. So, and it keeps getting worse and worse as the years and decades go by. So I have plenty of experience of that root negativity, self-delusion. That's the reason why I started spiritual practices 23 years ago, and I had been seeking for some meaning into my life for many years before that. But my motivation from the beginning was to reach this, what was called enlightenment. And I remember reading some, I started my practice in Zen Buddhism, and I remember reading some Zen books that had accounts of people, them telling of their experience when they had awakenings. And I immediately knew that that's what I want. That's exactly what I've been seeking since I was a little boy, and that's what I want. And so long story short, yes, I do not have the 5 poisons anymore. The 5 poisons, it sounds a bit like overused to use the word wisdom, because it's used so much, and the term enlightenment itself is a very loaded word. But once again, we are here discussing Buddha Dharma. So Buddha Dharma, which in our time, the main Buddha of our time is Buddha Shakyamuni. In his basic teachings in the suttas, and then later in Mahayana sutras that have been commented and expanded and re-explained in Vajrayana literature, there is very clear standards and very clear definition of Buddhahood. And well, having said that, not everything in the Mahayana sutras or in the classical Hinayana suttas are correct, because the Hinayana suttas were written down a few hundred years after Buddha's passing. So it is logical that many things that he actually said were lost, and many things have been changed afterwards. And same thing in Mahayana sutras, you can see that some of the stuff in, for example, about bhumis, that one would be able to multiply the bodies from 100,000 to 1 million, from bhumi 3 to bhumi 4. It just when you go through the process yourself, you can see that, oh, that's just some imagined somebody just made it up. But then again, in my I think it is in my third book, Buddhas Among Us, which gives the accounts of 6 of our Sangha members who have reached the realization of emptiness of all phenomena. I included in the back of that book quotes from many different Mahayana and Vajrayana masters, including Buddha Shakyamuni, Guru Rinpoche, many others, including Garchen Rinpoche, who's now 90 years old, roughly, and he lives in America, a Tibetan Buddhist master who is, according to my analysis, who is a Mahasiddha. So he's also become a living Buddha. But Garchen Rinpoche, he made a comment of these bhumis, that very down-to-earth comment, but it simply means growing into this natural clarity of mind, that it really doesn't have, anything to do with multiplying the bodies or something high-flying. It's really simple and really basic. So, but anyway, this enlightenment, which is called Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi in short, there is very clear definition for that in Buddhism, and a simple definition of that, traditional definition, is to turn the 5 poisons into 5 wisdoms, and that's it.
And so the reason I mentioned staying with you just a few months before was that I saw the end of this process, and it was still pretty intense.
Yes.
At the end, since emptiness realization, there was you went through quite a process that was very difficult. You were bringing up clearly some of your biggest traumas, etc. But even right at the end, there was significant stuff to work through. Maybe it seems like this one trauma knot was holding on to your whole system, and that distorts this perception. So then there's this moment where you have the release of all of the karmic residue from all of your bodies, which is what the cessation is. You seem to have a physical body cessation too. So the 2 subtle bodies and the physical body cessation for a 20-minute window. We'll talk more about the physical body later on, but the realization occurs in the 2 subtle bodies. Once the 2 subtle bodies has released in this cessation, and it's a permanent and stable realization, that's the insight, that's the realization of enlightenment. So do you want to talk us about this last period and leading up to this moment, and then how did it feel, like the actual cessation?
Well, I can say in general, of the last 5 years of my practice, where the main practice was to heal my complex trauma and figure out how to heal it, because nobody taught me how to heal it. After my 10th bhumi perfected and I came to, the emptiness realization, I had very, very little understanding of trauma. And through those many years when I was still doing emptiness practice, I thought that emptiness realization takes care of everything. I was completely wrong with that. So, I didn't know much about trauma. I didn't understand it at all. After I finished my emptiness practice in March of 2021, so 5 years ago in next month, so at first it was a very slow learning. But also what became apparent very soon, like within a month or 2 after the emptiness realization, was that there is so much pain. And I remember how it felt in the beginning, that my mind was clear. My mind was resting in that selfless clarity at all times. But there was so much pain, and my perception was tuned or calibrated in a way that when I used that kind of awareness that I had used in my tantric practice, tantric vipassana practice for many years, I couldn't find that pain, that residual suffering from that causal body that I had been used to perceiving. So I had to figure out, where is this coming from? Where is this pain and this?
So originally you described it as echo karmas,
Yes,
and
yeah,
I've heard other teachers describe echo karmas too. So it's clearly there's something about that.
yeah. So then slowly I started tuning in, feeling into it, starting to learn about it, and then one of my gurus, Babaji, told me that. What did he tell me? He said something like it's coming from the meridians or something. Yeah, he used the term meridian field, that it's the meridian field where it's coming from. And, I actually have quite a bit of experience of working with meridians because over 20 years ago I used to do shiatsu massage, shiatsu therapy as my profession for a couple of years. But my experience from back then of meridians and how it felt to work with meridians in my internal yoga practice just didn't meet at all. So I kind of had to figure out the whole thing. So all in all, these 4.5 years that it took was, I did a retreat for 14 months during that 4.5 years here at the ashram, here at home. I didn't leave the house many times during that time. I was practicing all time because I knew I had to. It felt such an immense undertaking, one, to heal complex trauma, and two, figure out the practices how others can do it. So, it really took everything I had. And my experience of healing my own complex trauma, it just took everything I had every day. It was that difficult. If one doesn't have complex trauma, one simply won't understand what an undertaking and how difficult it is. Because complex trauma is, in my case, started developing when I was 2 years old with very shocking experiences, and that developed how many years? Like 40 years until I started healing it properly. 40 years. So it's a lot of time for the root trauma to harden and other traumas to build on it through all kinds of experiences that I have had, very shocking experiences that I saw witnessed as a child, and being bullied as a teenager, and all kinds of betrayals with very close friends and ex-wives and so on. So there was lots of trauma to heal. And it's extremely painful to do that. It's the most unpleasant thing I know of. So, it really takes everything you have. And I didn't know, I listened to some lectures of psychologists, psychotherapists, and so on the last few years, and none of them even mentioned full healing of trauma. So this is not a thing in the world of psychology, and there's nothing, like really nothing about it in the world of Dharma also, like modern Dharma. There are modern Dharma teachers who join Buddhist practice with psychology, psychotherapy, So that's what I mean by modern Dharma. But classical Dharma had absolutely zero on this. And I think that, like I have said many times, I think that complex trauma existed in Buddha's time. It has always existed, but I think it has been very rare and extremely rare among practitioners. So this is what we discussed in that trauma episode. But I didn't get much help, and I didn't get much help from my masters either because they didn't know what it was. I remember a number of incidents when with Padmasambhava, with Agastya, with Babaji, with Amma, that they just didn't know. My channels were so screwed up, were so dried up, almost dead, that they had never seen that before. And therefore, they didn't have the like a ready solution for me. Just do these practices, do that, and that will fix that, that will fix that. They didn't have that. I had to figure out it all and use my body as a like a place of experiment to figure it out. But um, and many times I didn't know if I could feel like small changes, but the main that foundational negativity, cynicism, and so on, it just seemed like whatever I pour into it, it's not bothered by it. So despite of the little changes that I could see, but then it turned out that I was expecting to. I didn't have any idea how long, how more it would take. I was ready to. I thought in my mind like last autumn that okay, this might take 2 more years or 5 more years. I had no idea. It was that, how to say, unapparent to me. Like I had no idea whether it would happen next month or in 5 years' time. So I was really prepared. But then it just ceased. Suddenly. That was completely suddenly, completely unexpected. It was just poof, gone. I was sitting in the
And you did.
backyard like we are always playing with our dog Metta. We were playing and I was sitting down and sipping tea. And suddenly I could feel that cessation begin, this so familiar sensation where there is this kind of very graceful energy sweeping through the body, and it just makes everything stop, makes everything, all the habit patterns cease. And I was sitting there cross-legged in the backyard on the wooden part, like we have sat together when you have been here, and that wave of grace just swept through me, and I realized, okay, this is cessation is starting. And it was a three-body cessation, like you mentioned. Also, the physical imprints in the physical cells ceased, and the cessation of the three bodies, physical body included, lasted for 20 minutes. So after 20 minutes, the physical imprints came back, but the astral body imprints didn't return. My causal body having ceased already 5 years ago. So the astral body remained in cessation. So that's how it's been after that.
Was there anything obvious that this was the final cessation, or you still had to go through this 3 week trial period you give yourself?
Well, I knew pretty quickly, like on day 3 or 4, when the cessation had lasted 3 4 days, I knew that this this feels like a permanent shift, and it was. Yeah.
And how were those few days? Was there a sense of relief?
No, there was no sense of relief at all.
Oh.
because that sense of relief is opposed to stress or opposed to something. So there was no sense of, the only sense was like that something is not there anymore, that something has gone, you know. So the friction was gone, the friction arising from my trauma, from my selfishness, that was gone.
So what is the experience compared to just before and just after? Perhaps you want to describe the subtle differences between the week before and then how you experience the next week.
Well, it was very different because, like I said, that I had no idea whether it will take 2 years or 5 years more of that really great daily effort of practice. So there was still a lot going on, a lot. Or so it seemed to me. Like maybe it's because the habits of complex trauma, when they have been functioning in somebody's mind for 40 plus years, maybe it simply has such it catches the attention so strongly, so comprehensively, that it seems that way, that there's not much going on. Maybe it's that, I don't know. Would be glad to hear others comments about this. But it was very different. Like there were no fireworks, no heavenly trumpets, no mystical visions, nothing like that. It was simply that the week before, lots of negativity. And here I'm talking about compulsive negativity, non-optional. So that negativity from trauma, this is something that people without trauma don't understand, that you cannot just relax trauma. You cannot just relax it, like if you have a tense closed fist and then you can't just relax it like this. You can't do that with complex trauma because it's compulsive. It has a life of its own, and the whole healing process is figuring out how to get it to respond, how to get it to release all the stuff that it's holding, mending the broken channels and channel systems and so on. But week before and week after, or the day after, it was like maybe I could say day and night, because the negativity at first was there in such a strong way, and then it's completely gone. It's kind of like if I can use this analogy, that you're sitting in a room, and if you think the room full of mischievous teenagers just being crazy and doing stuff there, so one day they are there, week before they are there, and then one day later they're gone. Kind of like that. Yeah.
Krupa mentioned, in a way, it feels more silent. Is that something of that?
Yeah, peacefulness. But also something that is constantly mentioned in Mahasandhi Chokchen teachings, is spoken by many tantric masters, is that your mind stays the same, or pretty much the same. All those habitual negativity, that's gone, but all the emotions are still there. So, including anger, getting frustrated, getting upset, all of these are normal human emotions, and Buddhas have those as well. So, in Mahasandhi Chokchen teachings, the very basic teaching is that nothing needs to be changed. And that's a literal instruction. Nothing needs to be changed. Like when that is told to even a beginner practitioner who might have lots of negativity, lots of everything, nothing needs to be changed. So yeah, like I said, there's that whole range of completely normal human emotion with none of the negative reacting, like reacting out of to judge somebody or something, to just to, you know, we all know what it means to react negatively, react from the ego, so to speak. So that those kind of in some situations in some situations we naturally and perfectly react with anger, frustration, upset. This is normal. But when there is attachment and aversion involved, when there is a sense of ego involved, that's different than when there isn't ego involved. So this ego is some kind of glue, some kind of that makes things so much more complex, creates conflict, creates like a creates well, conflict, yes.
A distortion in a way.
Yes,
And so for people trying to understand what this is like, but they're thinking, oh well, there's still all the range of emotions. So how is that freedom from suffering? But it's all the emotions, but frictionless, without the triggering and reactions to it.
that's a perfect word, frictionless. It's the friction that is gone. You have thoughts, can be creative, you can just relax and be lazy on the couch, everything the same, but the friction is gone, and also the base negativity is gone. And something that is, there is a Buddha called Samantabhadra in Buddhism, which is Kuntu Zangpo in Tibetan, and that means all goodness, everything goodness. So this is Samantabhadra Kuntu Sangpo. It's like a archetype, a Buddha archetype of our very own nature, which when the five poisons are gone, emotional poisons, the poison of ignorance is gone, then the so-called five wisdoms come out. But wisdom is not a good word because it doesn't really tell anything what kind of wisdom. But what it practically means is positivity is replaced by negativity. And here we are not talking about some superficial positivity, but this
Yeah.
root ground positivity. So in the place of that selfishness and negativity coming out of selfishness or trauma, we are talking about something very fundamental positivity that is there in our very own nature, in the Buddha inside us. And when you remove that selfishness, heal your trauma, remove the see through the self-delusion, it's no longer Buddha within, it's Buddha here.
Mm.
So Buddha means wakeful, literally. So yeah, it's nothing more complex or esoteric than that. We are really talking about the mind, emotions, psychology. That's it.
So I've heard it before when people talking about the Brahma Viharas and describing the Brahma Viharas, the four sublime abodes: compassion, love, joy, equanimity. That describing these as the positive emotions. But I've seen people also react against this idea of positive emotions because that means you need to push away the negative emotions. And I think that's right to push away that idea that to see all the negative emotions as negative. But what you're saying is actually the whole range you see in a positive light. There's no friction against
Yeah,
emotions.
it is like that's what I meant by superficial positivity. That it's not replacing the negativity, like you have a pile of shit and then you put cream on it and pretend that it's a cake. So it's not like that. So this positivity, like you said, Brahma Viharas, the abodes of God, abodes of Brahma. What is it? Love, compassion, joy, and equanimity.
Mm.
These are qualities of our basic nature that are inherently in us. But delusion and negative emotions, selfishness, trauma distorts it all. So, in that sense, when we speak of attaining enlightenment, it is not literally an attainment. You don't attain anything. You just remove what is excess. You remove the baggage that is preventing you from seeing your nature, and that is preventing from the inherent qualities of your nature to bloom like flowers bloom. So that's it. There is no attainment. There is nobody who attains enlightenment. And yet we commonly speak of Padmasambhava attained enlightenment, or some great yogini attained rainbow body. No, it's not an attainment, but this is how we commonly speak about it.
Mm. It's just a practical use of the
Yes,
word because there's the path to follow and there's a result.
yes,
There's the fruit of the path.
yes.
And so I find my mind thinking it's quite interesting that you say there's no relief because that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to this big relief at the end. So that's interesting to think about. So in that context, perhaps can you describe what this experience has been like for the last how long ago was it now? November the 11th was
Three
when
months
you
ago.
had your final. Mm,
Yeah, three
mm,
months now. Well, uh, how has it been since? Well, it has been different. I wouldn't want to go back. Has it been better? I couldn't say that it's an enhancement or something is better. It's simply that something is gone. Maybe you could say again in common terms that I definitely recommend it to everybody. It's better to be like this than to be, pestered by your delusions and traumas and endless negativity day and night and be exhausted from it. In that sense, yes, you can say it's better, but literally, it is not like an update, like an enhancement again. Relief. The reason why I said that there wasn't relief because I remember when I still was looking for this enlightenment to happen, I was attached to it.
mm.
I was looking for to have a relief, to get a relief. But that changed because it had to change. I couldn't. The process really rips you apart with compassion, but it kind of rips you apart. It doesn't allow you to have any attachment or aversion to anything, to anything. And in that sense, it just
Mm.
compassionately rips you apart. But yeah, if you're waiting for something to happen, then you're also attached to relief, consequential relief. That's why I say that there was no relief, just absence of friction.
So how has that experience been? That is there some kind of transition period, like the body is getting used to it, the mind's getting used to this new experience of not having this friction?
yes, there is always with each excuse me, with each shift, there is the getting used to period when you know, whatever you have in your life, social relationships, your situations at work, situations doing everyday chores, going to grocery store, something like that. So you are going through your routines, right? And then as you go through your routines, you have different reactions and thoughts. And then when you've had a shift, you experience those routines, these different thoughts, different experiences, different emotions in a bit different way. So in that sense, there is kind of like in Finnish we have a word sisäänajo. It's like a getting used to period. It lasts for maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks. When you go through the same situations, you talk with your friends and this kind of thing, and then you just notice that, oh, that one thing that I always had that thought or that reaction when speaking to this person, but that is not there anymore. Like that. Do you understand? Like you just realize that something that was there isn't there anymore. What do you have in place is just being able to be present, just being able to, not really being able to be present because it's effortless to be present. But it's also effortless when these four kleshas of the subtle body have been turned into four wisdoms or positive qualities. They are spontaneous, which means effortless. You don't have to, okay, now negativity is rising in my mind when I'm talking to my friend who is talking about the stupid thing that he did to me 4 years ago. Now there is negativity arising. Om mani padme hum, om mani padme hum. I'm counteracting it. I'm releasing that poison. None of that. That is gone. That is completely gone. What you have instead is just soft presence. You could say, again, something that is overused. You could say that in the place of that, there is this peaceful love.
Mm.
You're just available.
So this
So,
is the wisdom.
yes, but coming back to this 3 month period, so 3 months is 1 or 2 months is enough for anybody to kind of test the shift that you've had. So, I've had the whole range of emotions, becoming very, very angry at some situations, to some people, becoming upset of all kinds of things, the full 9 yards. I've experienced all of that. But again, it's different when there is no attachment going on, when there is no aversion, then the emotion is just pure emotion, which is expression of our basic nature, Buddha nature. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the wisdom aspect is you're not acting by going through these loops of conditioned thought in reaction to whatever is out there or this pull towards whatever's out there. Now there's just this free, the emotions are free, expression is free, and they're not distorted through any kind of lens.
Yes, exactly so. Yeah, exactly like that.
And is this how you might describe the difference between emptiness realization and the astral body realization? They're kind of like two lenses, where the emptiness realization is the very fundamental lens that we look through and perceive life, me and other. And then there's this lens of the restricted ego of the body. So would you describe it as a realization in the astral body, and that it was like perceiving reality through a double lens almost?
Yes, definitely. And I would even say that it's kind of a triple lens for those who have complex trauma. Because, so maybe if we come back to trauma a little bit, so, there are different intensities in trauma. And when I speak of complex or developmental trauma, these terms are sometimes used synonymously. Sometimes complex trauma and developmental trauma mean different things, but I use them synonymously. Okay, so and then there is also my complex trauma was pretty serious, but there are much more intense or severe versions of complex trauma. Some of our Sangha members have a more severe version of that. So, so the reason why I say that it's sometimes three lenses is because so traditional Dharma doesn't really understand, and I've seen so many examples of this through the years, that traditional teachers of traditional Dharma do not understand traumatization at all. They think that it is just, classical selfishness, like is taught in Buddha Dharma, like is taught in Sanatana Dharma, but it is not. It is like once again, I think that complex trauma has existed always in history, but it is so widespread now. I could easily say that maybe at least half of our Sangha have complex trauma, half of our members. And I think that applies to all the modern practitioners. It's so widespread, it's so common. But when we speak of trauma, and when we look at the traditional explanations of the Kleshas, you can see that that's not really, those two don't really match. And I've seen this in practice, like Dharma teachers from different traditions, that they don't, when they have students who have complex trauma, they try to help them with the tools that they know. They try to help them to remove this selfishness. But they don't realize that it's not just selfishness, there's much more to it. And that's where the traditional forms of Dharma, with all due respect, fail. I've seen so many like really heartbreaking failures of this, because when few examples come into my mind of people who I trained with, this, you can have somebody who has devoted their life to Dharma practice and have become ordained and want to lead that life till they die. But then the tradition and their teacher don't know how to help them, and they just try to stick with the traditional format, just do more of those traditional practices, and then this person is in such great pain, like visibly suffering, and these practices, despite of doing more and more, are not helping. And I've seen this lead to those people, how do you say, reversal of ordination. Unordain, leave Dharma practice, leave their teachers, because they just can't, it doesn't make sense to them. So this is a real problem in the world of Dharma. I've seen so many people have so many discussions online with people that they have such a firm conviction that, okay, my this or that time-tested lineage practice will heal my trauma, but it won't. It likely won't. It might heal some of it, little bit of it, but if you are still very angry, very easily shaken, have so much fear, anxiety, how do you say, contempt for others, all this cynicism, there is so much more going on that you might even be aware of. That's just the reality of this problem.
I've seen it too, where people. So the other side of that is where people get stuck in the tradition, like you're saying there,
Yes.
and they get this idea of, well, I just need to do more. But the problem is, it becomes so disheartening that the effort to try and do more, they never get to that point where they prove to themselves that, oh well, having done more, they're always working to that point of trying to reach doing more, and
Yes.
it's not helpful. They haven't realized that point that they need to jump ship and try a new
Yeah.
path.
And there is really nothing wrong with getting attached to a tradition, but we need to ask the basic questions. Teacher, you present your tradition, you present a training system. Please tell me how the first awakening happens, how the whole path of emptiness wisdom. Tell me how it happens. Tell me if you have reached that. Tell me if there are other teachers or practitioners who have reached that. And please tell me how these four poisons of the subtle body, please tell me how they are transformed. Even if you haven't reached it yourself, please tell me how it is done. And also, please tell me how trauma is healed, how severe trauma is healed. So ask these questions. I've been saying this for years, that, ask your teachers how these things are done and how you get to the end of it. But people don't ask. It is simply taken like it's kind of the checks and balances thing, that there are no balances. Everybody keeps saying that this or that lineage is time-tested, direct lineage from Buddha Shakyamuni through 100 generations, directly undiluted to our day. Right? Everybody says that. Okay, but answer these questions. And give me solid answers, not some bullshit joke diverting your attention answers. Give me solid answers. Let's make this a little bit more scientific, Let's make this logical instead of it being like this vague, whatever nonsense.
So I was thinking about how some people don't have so much trauma, or maybe they don't even experience a life of trauma, but we're talking about trauma this, trauma that. We're not saying that everything is trauma that we're dealing with, but what we're saying is that this triple lens, that at the very root of our final suffering is our main trauma. If we've got complex trauma, there's like this, the deepest underlying root that we view reality with. So perhaps you can talk about what was this for you, and what was that process of trying to discover and uproot this?
Something before discussing that, I would like to say that, so if we think of astral body or subtle body, the four Klesha practice, it's not necessarily, I have also students who don't have complex trauma. So they might have some little bit of shocking memories, just teeny bit of traumatization, but this doesn't qualify as complex trauma. And these people don't need to feel bad. that they don't have complex trauma, right? But then there's other type of egoism, which is selfishness, just selfishness. And this is something that we already know from classical Dharma. It speaks about this in abundance. But what it might mean is pride, arrogance. So, for example, having lived such a privileged life that it has made you pride and arrogant, but you don't even see it, you don't even know it, that you have absorbed such cultural false sense of pride or arrogance. So this kind of selfishness can happen. But about that, those lenses, the reason why it's difficult to illuminate and release, heal trauma is because these habits and patterns become they become you. They become such an embedded part of you that you can still perceive that, for fuck's sake, I feel so negative and it's killing me, this negativity, this constant, it's absolutely killing me and exhausting me, taking all my life energy, right? But the reason why it's so difficult to heal it is because I've used this phrase that it's kind of in the subconscious of your subconscious mind. It's it has created your personality to such a large degree that it's difficult to see it, so difficult to see it. Doesn't mean that now I know, I can say, I've spoken about how extremely difficult it is, but I can also say that it's possible to fully heal it. I know it now. And I mentioned Simha, one of my ordained students who is now 7 days into cessation of his astral body, including his complex trauma. So it is possible to do it, but you need to have very specific know-how to make it happen. But yeah, it is difficult because it's kind of, if you have a blind angle when you drive a car, it's kind of a double blind angle. So even if you look at the blind angle, you still don't see it. You have to find a way to kind of do another switch to be able to perceive it. Yeah.
Would you say this description is somewhat accurate, that so there's traumatic events that occur in our life and we create this sort of split between us and this world that we're pushing away, and we end up forming this trauma forms our identity. So almost like we're looking through the lens of trauma as if it's who we are, and this is all we know is our reactions through this lens of trauma. So that's why it's so fundamental to work through. That it's so tricky to look outside of that.
Exactly. There are a practical example of that. I know people who are so traumatized that they absolutely believe that they are worthless and that they are undeserving. So undeserving that when there is anything good coming to them or given to them, they feel unworthy. They are so convinced. Their trauma has convinced them so well that they get, how do you say, they feel physically off or unwell when they are shown some kindness or shown some. I've seen this so many times in teachings that some people have this so deeply ingrained unworthiness that they think that, oh, I'm not worthy of awakening, I'm not worthy of these high teachings or whatever. This is exactly, trauma having become like such a large part of these people's personalities. And yet, they find their way to teachings, they part of their personality, part of them, part of their nature says that there is awakening. There you can make this better. You just find your way to a teaching or a teacher or a tradition that will help you, right? So there you have it.
So can you perhaps describe some of this process of discovering this route? And I've liked an analogy you've used in the past of like these are like roots of trauma in the body where they get so dried up, it's like they're dead. But you had this idea that, well, there's something still alive, so there must be a way to resuscitate these
Yes.
dead roots.
It's really basic logic that even when complex trauma, it creates these trauma knots, K-N-O-T, knots, trauma knots in the body. In my case, it was about the size of my index finger, right there at the tip of my tailbone, from the tailbone up towards the spine. So it doesn't seem that big of an area. But this is like the headquarters of the
Mm.
of the trauma in a sense, and kind of the main headquarters, the main route. But then it is connected to a whole network through the meridian channels, through the astral body channels, to the rest of the body, to the whole body. So that's kind of the headquarters, the main area, which in my case was in tailbone. It can be elsewhere in the body. Some of my students have it in the throat, some have it in the chest, somebody has it in the leg, inside somewhere. So in my case, it was just in the tailbone. But
Which is really it's interesting that this is really the root. You would expect that to be somehow related to security and safety, maybe.
maybe I wouldn't draw the conclusion like that directly, but
Sure.
if you have that kind of trauma not somewhere, you will feel anxious and unsafe in so many situations. So it's
Mm.
not. That's why I say that it's not necessarily connected with like root chakra or this kind of thinking. But yeah, it is like a pretty large bundle of astral body channels, meridians, stuck like squeezed together, and kind of like a bouquet of flowers, but that the flowers and the stems are almost dried up dead, almost. So they are just barely alive, and of course they can't fully die because that would I would have to be dead. My astral body would have to be completely dead for them to fully die, but kind of on the verge of death, just struggling. And I spoke about this in the trauma episode that we did, but this is exactly what my gurus didn't know. They hadn't seen that before. They didn't have the tools for healing that, for bringing this bundle of channels back to life. And the reason why we are talking about this trauma node is because that's where the most of the trauma stuff is kind of very tightly packed together. All the emotional suppression, it's there. All the memories that you don't want to remember, it's packed there. So it's extremely tightly packed. So it doesn't seem physically that it's that big of a deal, but psychologically it's really, like we already discussed, it can define your life to such a large degree
Mm.
because of the emotional and energetic weight that it has and carries. And once again, it is compulsive. This is the thing that I think separates complex trauma from light trauma, that it has a life of its own. You cannot just relax it, you know. So there are challenges. But so when somebody has a trauma reaction, let's say panic attack, social anxiety, it lashes out from that trauma node to the rest of the body, to the chest, to the back, to the head, to the limbs. Your limbs come like cooked spaghetti, completely limp. You know, your hands shake, you can't have coffee with your friend. I remember back in the day when my daughter was born, this was maybe 11, 12 years ago, and I was still married to my ex-wife. I would have panic attacks having lunch with my wife and my 1-year-old child. You know, it's completely irrational. But that's again the thing with complex trauma, that it has a life of its own. But long story short, to answer your question, it is possible to fully heal it. You just need endless patience. You kind of have to be stupid in that sense, actually, because the process is that unpleasant. So you kind of just have to fuck it. I just do it whatever it takes, even if it killed me. You have to have that kind of attitude. This attitude has been spoken in Dharma context for so many things, that you have to be, figuratively speaking, willing to die. And it definitely put me into that test. So it's highly unpleasant, but it's possible to do when you have the right tools and right understanding.
Perhaps a bit of reference for people who are listening and maybe they're not familiar with tantric practice or the effects that it has on you. When we're doing these tantric practices, and particularly with the astral body, we're putting pressure on the whole system. And what Baba's talking about, when the root trauma spreads across, well, we talk about, for example, in the physical body, we have fascia, the fascia tissues which connect everything together. They connect everything from head to toe in all three directions. So if you get a really tight hamstring, this sort of affects the rest of your body, or if you hurt your back, your whole body will sort of tense up. It's a little bit similar with astral body, where you put pressure on the whole system and you're bringing stuff to the surface that you're forced to work with. So, in a sense, if you didn't have much trauma and you didn't do such practices, you could have certain stages of realization and feel pretty good, and carry on thinking that you're enlightened. But until you put this extra pressure in the system, you can't help but see, oh, there is stuff left. And with the complex trauma, it's like difficult to work with.
Yes, precisely so.
Is this a good time for tea?
Yes.
So one thing I wanted to ask was, has your experience of people, or the way you relate to people, or how you perceive people changed in some sort of way?
Yes, it has changed a lot, because my main fear was social anxiety, which means fear of people. So this has changed a lot. You know, the I've been a full-time teacher for 18 years, and I've taught, I don't know, a few hundred retreats at least. Must have been more, maybe 400, 500. And I would have panic attacks when I teach, because you're sitting in front of people and people are looking at you, and when you make eye contact with people, it's so scary experience for somebody who has social anxiety. So I would have social anxiety all the time, and not only when teaching, but when having meals on retreats, when talking with people, I would feel afraid. So again, somebody who hasn't experienced that doesn't know what the consequence of having so much anxiety and fear was that I was absolutely exhausted after all retreats that I taught for the 16, 17 previous years. So it's a very severe, very serious problem was for me. And that doesn't mean that I didn't want to be there. Well, of course, sometimes. Also in this job, in this line of work, you have those days and sometimes those periods when somebody is such a prick towards you that you just say, fuck it, I don't want to be here, I don't want to do this. So it's in everything. Also in Dharma work, even when we cultivate kindness and compassion, you have those days that fuck everybody, fuck this, fuck everything. You have those moments and days. But having said that, at the same time, I remember when I took my Bodhisattva vows and my refuge in 2003 or 2004, and I remember taking those Bodhisattva vows of compassion and love and kindness into my heart. I reflected on them, and then I really took them. I vowed them, took an oath. So despite of this social anxiety, panic attacks, shitty days at work, the compassion was greater. And of course it is greater because the social anxiety comes from trauma, which even though it can be very comprehensive and compelling experience, love and compassion comes from me, the true self. So of course it is stronger, and that alone helped me to continue through all these years. So even though it was a son of a bitch to have those countless panic attacks in front of people, and I know that some people saw it, they have told me, I have talked with them about this. Some people didn't notice anything, but it was very difficult. But when that anxiety, the trauma is no longer there, it's a completely different experience with people. People who I meet related to my work, relatives who I meet. I haven't met that many relatives the past 3 months, but I have met my spouse's relatives. And then just random people, when you go to grocery store or cafe or something, the energy is completely different. So it's pleasant. For the first time in my life, it's pleasant to be with people. It is not unpleasant, scary, I want to run away, aversion. It's just pleasant. It's pleasant to be there, even if just, please, can I have a cup of mint tea? And just yesterday we went to a cafe with Rani, and I actually had cocoa with cream and what was it, like some dessert, some very nice dessert. So when just having a very short communication with a waiter at a cafe, it's a very different experience. And I can see that, of course, when somebody comes talks with people with a kind of authentic, soft, genuinely kind way, they are. Yes, of course, I'll take your order. Just a moment. So nothing, again, nothing like, nothing dramatic like that they get a big Shakti part or some, nothing like that. It's
Yeah.
just this genuineness in human situations.
There was a really beautiful story, little story that Sangeeta said, where she was with her daughter and felt finally present for the first time, as it were. And even that there was a little bit of sadness to this because she recognized the lack of presence previously. So it's something like that.
Yeah, I had the, when I listened her say that, I felt the exact same thing. But having said that, you have to have compassion to your past as well. So, you know, we all try our best, and even people who are very mean and rude and evil, they just kind of cannot help it.
Mm-hmm.
When the traumatization is so deep and you've been beaten physically and sexually abused and psychologically abused and verbally abused since you were, you know, this tall, since you were a baby, like a small kid, of course it will grow. That negativity, that meanness, rudeness, it will take a hold of you. And this is very important to realize as a part of healing process that, you know, we usually get traumatized by other people, often by our parents or whoever is looking after us. And if they're traumatized, you will just inherit the same thing through their behavior, how you're treated. So, so one big kind of milestone in healing of one's own trauma is to forgive and to pray for those who've hurt you.
Mm.
Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, because if people don't work on themselves, be they our parents or whoever have hurt us, whoever had treated us wrongly, you know, they won't change their behavior. Their behavior will not change without psychological healing, spiritual healing, without having a spiritual connection, be it Buddhist connection, Christian connection, whatever. So forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, but getting to that point when we can forgive those who have done wrong and harmed us. It's a very, very significant milestone and turning point. It feels so good to be able to do that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Would you say this turning point started a little bit before the final cessation, and then is this a way how you're relating to your past a little bit differently now? Do you, when you look at your past life or your past lives, do you see them differently in some way?
Coming back to that previous point of, you know, I have two children. They are 12 and 10 years old. And, you know, I tried my best as a parent before that. And I've been divorced from my ex-wife, their mother, for 6 years now. And of course, it's been difficult. But, you know I've tried my best. And so I don't feel regret in that sense, but I'm just happy that they now have a father at 10 and 12 years old who can be really present with them and who can, you know, the energy that I have now, that I'm really happy that I can share that energy with them, which is something that I didn't have ever with my own parents. You know? Because if I wasn't a practitioner and if I hadn't done this healing and waking up, I would probably be pretty much the same parent as my parent was to me. So, you know, it's a big difference. But coming back to that, relating to past, I don't feel burdens anymore of the past. I can't think of those traumatizing memories, those traumatizing people. Some of them who were incredibly mean to me and incredibly, I wouldn't say evil, but borderline evil. Very mean.
Mm.
So yeah, I can think about all those things, all those people without feeling fear or hatred or any of that, but feeling acceptance, understanding. Kind of, that's what wisdom means, love, compassion, kindness. Yeah. And one thing, this, you said something that, so this started happening, this being able to forgive, it started happening quite soon after I started my trauma healing process. So good 2-3 years ago already. And I'll tell you a particular experience that I had. So I was bullied quite badly in my higher elementary school when I was 13 to 15, 16 years old. I looked different, I used different clothing, I listened to different music, and these were some of the reasons why I was bullied very badly. So for over 30 years, since I was 13, 14 years old, for over 30 years, almost every day, I would have the image of the main bully who bullied me when I was 13, 14 years old would come into my mind. His image would come into my mind for over 30 years. My subconscious kept reminding me that, kept telling me that you have to, this is a problem, this is an unresolved issue. This is how the subconscious mind, by the way, works. It constantly tells you what's the problem. But as we are not aware of it, we miss the cue. We miss the request. So I was doing healing practice, accepting these people as who they are. There's a Buddha inside them as well. There is God inside them as well. So I was working with that so-called pure perception. It's called in Buddhism, seeing to their essence, seeing to the Buddha nature in that bully, in other people who have treated me wrongly. And then after some time of doing that, accepting them, sending them blessings, forgiving them, I had this interesting vision for maybe over 2 days, like few sessions. I would see exactly like you see in Buddhist art, where you have Buddhas and Bodhisattvas like wearing these beautiful crowns and necklaces and beautiful robes and clothing and bracelets and rings and anklets and the whole like clothing, jewels, flower gardens around them, like something gold around them, like golden ornaments, chairs, something like this. I would see that bully, then a dozen other people who had been traumatizing to me. I would see them one after the other as perfect Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, wearing those crowns, those beautiful ornaments, clothing, jewels. I would see them as, emanations of different Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And it was funny because kind of fascinating in a sense, because the Bodhisattva aspect of that bully, for example, was different from somebody else. So let's say that it was a she after him, and she was a different bodhisattva. And then somebody else was a different bodhisattva, somebody else was different bodhisattva. So the crowns and ornaments changed accordingly when the different aspects changed. I had these visions, and it wasn't like that at all. It was, oh yeah, so there truly is Buddha in them as well. And then these burdens, these related to these particular people, ceased. Yeah. Stopped being there. I stopped seeing the face of the head bully, for example, that had been repeating for over 30 years, almost on a daily basis. After that experience, it just didn't happen anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds nice.
Yeah, it's nice.
And so I was contemplating as you're talking about how you relate to people differently, how these burdens have gone, and I was thinking of this looking forward to relief. That I'm also looking forward to bliss, this experience of total bliss, etc. One of the things that often you experience with like Kriya Yoga practice is this pressure on your system and the pressure in different channels, and particularly the pressure in a particular knot. At some point, they turn in a way where the pressure stops being so uncomfortable, and it's almost like they're melting, and you experience this bliss experience. At the moment, I'm experiencing a lot of bliss in channels in my brain, as like it feels like channels are opening up or peeling open, and then from what I sense from it is the prana begins to flow. And my understanding of it is that when prana flows, you now have access to your natural experience of your Buddha nature, or more, a little bit of access to that. But I'm sensing from having heard you three talk about things that it doesn't feel like a bliss experience so much as this is how things should feel. That all of this stuff and this baggage that was in the way of our perception of things is now the normal experience without this friction.
Yes, there's kind of like a very widespread common mispresentation of how it feels to be like a Buddha, how enlightenment feels like. And that mispresentation is that everything is just peaceful all the time and blissful all the time and joyful all the time. Everything is just perfect like that all the time. And that's a mispresentation. There's a lot of truth to that, but it depends a lot what is happening in your life. So you're not dependent on having just your favorite cup of Starbucks coffee to feel happy and blissful. You're not dependent on external circumstances. But let's say that you're a Buddha and you're a boss at a company. You have employees under you and you have deadlines to think about. You have certain projects that need to be finished, and you're the one who has to oversee that everything gets done. And the deadline is in 3 days, and there's 10 days worth of work to be done in those 3 days. And you're a Buddha. You don't have selfish reactions, negativity reactions, but you still have, fucking hell, if the deadline is not met, we will lose $1 million. Okay? And that's it has an impact on you, on your employees, it has impact on the company. So you have that responsibility. Right? Do you think that, would anybody think that for those following 3 days when you have to ensure that the project gets done, you will be just happy and blissful and everything is okay, and everything is okay as it is. You don't need to push your employees at all. Everything will just flow naturally. No, this is exactly the mispresentation, that yes, you can feel whole and calm and in your center, effortlessly clear, all that, but you would have to, we have a faculty of discrimination, right? We have reason, we have logic. You would have to use it, and you would have to put pressure on certain people that the thing gets done and so on. But you wouldn't be like just flowering, just like a rain of flowers and blissful dance and song and dance. Okay? Same, like, but you would have equanimity, right? Another example of lots of Tibetan lamas and Rinpoches were imprisoned on Chinese gulags. These, how do you say, like labor camps, labor prisons, some for decades. I was very touched when I read some of those stories when I was a teenager. But I don't know, do they still exist, like gulags? Maybe they are, I don't know. But think of a fully enlightened Rinpoche, some lama, some yogi, and they have to work 14 hours a day. They get 1 meal a day or 2 at tops, but the meal is shit. It's just a piece of dry bread, maybe even moldy bread, and it's cabbage soup with some salt in it. It's just shit. And consequentially, your body takes the toll. You get weak, your muscles become weak, you lose weight, your hair falls out, maybe even your teeth fall out because you get no nutrition. Do you think that you will be blissful and happy all the time? Right? No. But you will have equanimity if you are a Buddha. So that equanimity is something that you fall back to, even if you have to express wrath or natural anger, or you have to exercise discrimination, or even if you have that joyful, blissful, loving expression. Equanimity stays in all of them, the whole range of emotion. Hugging Saint Amma, who I met her the first time in 2003, so 23 years ago. And I have observed and seen her through these years many times. Last, like as you mentioned, last autumn in Switzerland. And many have seen her, like when she's sitting there, she's mostly in this bubbling, joyful, blissful, leaning forward to grab anybody who's coming to hug her and giving her blessings. But if you pay attention, there's so much more emotional expression happening in her than just that. Sometimes some of her close students come to ask somebody and she answers like that, making a face or something like that. She doesn't only just accept everything that is presented to her, but sometimes yeah, that's it. Emotional range. And I'm not a scholar. I'm absolutely lousy when it comes to scriptures, and I haven't read that much, and what I have read, I have forgotten what was said where. AI is nowadays very good because you can you can find the information so easily, what was said in which scripture. But there is only one quote that from an ancient Kashmiri lady Mahasiddha, Sahaja Yogini Chinta, that perfectly explains. She doesn't only say that like bliss and
Do you
joy.
want me to read it?
In a moment. She doesn't only say that bliss, peace, and joy are the natural state, but she also says that seemingly what people associate with only destructive, samsaric, selfish, self-deluded state, she says that those are also natural state. You can read it if you have it.
Activities that are graceful, heroic, terrifying, compassionate, furious, arrogant, possessive, and envious, all without exception, are perfect forms of pure self-illuminated wisdom.
I remember when I read that maybe 6, 7 years ago, something like that, I felt like, first I was, what? And then I felt like, yes! Because I haven't seen like Longchenpa and other authors like him, like Longchenpa. I haven't seen them express Buddha nature of mind like that. Yeah. But she was 100% accurate if you ask me. That's what I've
I
been
was
trying
thinking
to
it,
say.
yeah. I was thinking of quite an extreme example of Amar in the documentary of her in the 2004 tsunami. You see her whole range of emotions. She's not just peace and bliss all the way through, obviously, because she's doing her best to help everyone day and night for however many weeks she did.
Yeah, yeah.
So one thing I thought about was how this path, or you described a little bit earlier, how this path isn't quite so linear as the causal realization. In a way, it's a non-linear path where early on you had a 2 day cessation, and then no cessation for a year or more. So it's very difficult to understand along this way. But I'm wondering whether you discovered anything. We'll chat more about in other podcasts, more detail about the practices. But were there any discoveries that you made that okay, this is the essential point in practice wise that you recognized along the way or towards the end?
Well, there were signs like some of the practices that we do are actually classical shamanic practices, like soul retrieval and power retrieval, for example. And now I'm talking about soul retrieval in shamanic context. Are also practices called soul retrieval in Tibetan Bon Buddhism, but as far as I know, shamanic soul retrieval is very different. So we do soul retrieval, we call it mending practice, mending the broken human practice, where what happens with complex trauma is that the channels of the subtle body, astral body, get broken. Kind of like you have a glass, and then if you chip it with a hammer and it loses a bit here and loses a bit here and there, exactly the same way channels get broken, bits and pieces get removed. And also, if you look at the astral body as this kind of big fabric made of maybe 1,000 channels, 1,000 meridian channels, sometimes it happens like figuratively speaking, if somebody came and hit on my shoulder with an axe, and then it cut through the whole arm, so that the whole arm was hanging only by it was attached only by a piece of skin anymore, like a severed arm that was still attached only by skin. So that happens, forgive me for this gross analogy, but it's a perfect analogy for what happens with the meridian system. Psychology speaks of dissociation.
Yeah.
So dissociation that comes with complex trauma, which creates that compulsiveness, it not being affected by, even if you try to relax, part of you just doesn't relax. It's because this trauma has created dissociation. So literally part of your subtle body is removed from the whole, and because it just doesn't behave like rest. It doesn't react like the rest of the body. So one of our healing practices is, what is it called? Reintegrating the dissociated parts of the psyche. So reintegration practice, where we attach that severed arm, figuratively speaking, back into the rest of the meridian system. So through practices like mending, this reintegration practice, number of other practices like power retrieval, where you call all the vitality that has leaked out from you. That's the thing why complex trauma is so exhausting on daily basis, why you feel so tired all the time, is because of these dissociated parts and then these broken channels. Vitality keeps leaking out from your system. So then when you have a trauma reaction, you have a panic attack, it just all vitality leaks out in a couple of minutes, and then you can be exhausted for hours, days. It depends on the case. But so one practice is, with some practices we just put the broken pieces back together, kind of glue them back together, and then also invite all that vital energy that has leaked out to come back. And when you do practices like that, you can instantly feel the benefit, the effect. You instantly feel better. I've had a number of people come to me, our trauma healing practices are available for free for everybody. On our YouTube channel, we have these recordings of the trauma special sessions. And I've had so many people have sent me messages that they might have been practitioners of this or that type of, Tibetan Buddhism or whatever, or they might have gone to psychotherapy for a number of years. And then when they do this trauma special one, the first trauma special, just for once, they feel that, oh, this fixed a problem that I've had for so and so many years. And it instantly did it. So we can see from such little mending experiences that something is happening, something beneficial is happening. But as you were talking about that non-linearity, is that a word?
Yeah.
Like non-linearness of trauma healing. Yes, it is non-linear. And again, like in Shravakayana, that is sometimes called Hinayana or Theravada Buddhism, they speak about this cycle of insight. So they speak of the cyclical, how the insight process is cyclical. And this applies to all insight practice, not only Hinayana, Shravakayana practice, but also Mahayana insight practice, Vipassana, Tantric, Vajrayana insight practice. So this cycle that things repeat themselves also applies to the path of wisdom and clarity in Amrita Mandala. So there you have a linear process. It repeats itself the same way all the time. So you have a dark night, rough patch, stuff comes up, you bring awareness to it. It might be difficult to do so, unpleasant to do so, but when you do so, sooner or later, it will lead to cessation, nirodha. So some causes of delusion cease, and this ceasing is awakening experience. We call them bhumi events, bhumi openings, bhumi perfections in Amrita Mandala. So, so you have a dark night, bringing awareness into the dark night, illuminating the dark night. What follows is a cessation. After cessation, you have like a easy patch, easy period for some time until new dark night starts to kick in. That's the cycle. And it repeats itself again and again and again until the causal body is completely purified, until emptiness is fully realized. And the reason why it's linear is because you have the two opposites, dark night and cessation. Dark night and cessation. The reason why the healing of trauma is non-linear because you don't have the cessation as a rule. So what you have, I was joking about this on the winter retreat over New Year's, that you have dark night and then you have less dark night. And then you have again dark night and less dark night. So it's this is why I was saying that it's so difficult, because you don't really get breaks. As a rule, you don't get breaks. But sometimes you have cessations. But like on the emptiness side of things, cessations increase in duration as a rule. They increase from like first bhumi opening might be 15 seconds, something like that, and then next bhumi opening might be 30 seconds, and so on. So it, as a rule, it increases, but this is not the case with astral body. So it can be anything from half an hour to next one being a day long, to next one being 2.5 days long, to next one being again half an hour, to next one being hour long, and then suddenly you're just done with it all. So it's completely random in my experience.
With huge periods of no cessation.
If I may add something important, if I may say that, and once again, I'm not aware that any Buddhist text would give any other explanation except that cycle of insight that keeps repeating itself always. And like I said, I'm not aware. So if somebody is aware of that, this is actually that classical Buddhist texts give also the option that it can happen that it's dark night, less dark night, dark night, less dark night. So I would be happy to know, but as far as I'm aware, I haven't ever seen that mentioned anyway. Which testifies my impression that classical Dharma doesn't know about working with complex trauma.
I'm wondering whether in my own experience I'm recognizing the dark nights more easily, and in a way they seem a bit more compact, compressed. There's this moment where I enter the dark night, and it's like the pressure weighs in on you, and it's almost like you become comatose. You can't really do anything. But I'm becoming much more aware that I'm going into it and how long it's going to be, in a way. But then you don't get full relief. You just get a little bit of relief, and you sort of you start to appreciate these less dark nights. But you said before, what I'm noticing, like you said earlier, is that there's more and more, there's nowhere to turn for this refuge. I notice my brain looking out here or over there for relief or bliss or some just sense that how do I know this is going to be over? But there is nowhere. There is no refuge to take other than your own experience, and that's a very maturing part of it. In a way, you could call the astral body purification the stage of maturation for the practitioner.
Yes, yes. Yeah. It is maturation is something to talk about, something to consider, but we can, and we definitely do that. Everybody does that. We try to, we are attached to whatever can offer us a break, momentary relief. But momentary relief suggests that samsara continues. And the whole ordeal of Dharma practice is to put an end to the 5 poisons, all of it. Our whole samsaric existence, if we pursue the path of enlightenment and actually want to get enlightened, like Guru Padmasambhava, Babaji, Buddha, Christ, if we really want that, we come to face with our attachments. So, common people take refuge first thing in the morning, cup of coffee and cigarette. I used to do that when I was plus minus 20 years old. First thing in the morning, taking refuge in black coffee and cigarette, and then taking refuge in the toilet seat. But similarly, like we were just talking about this yesterday on the phone with Simha, that those little breaks that you get from little pleasures, cup of tea, cup of coffee, sex, some foods, your favorite restaurant, those become meaningless at some point. I experienced it. It was funny because he mentioned it first, and then by him mentioning it, he reminded me that, oh yes, I had that too. Suddenly, it's because of the attachment. No problem with a cup of coffee, no problem with cake, no problem with having sex, no problem with masturbation, none of it. It's because of the attachment. The attachment, when it starts getting illuminated, you kind of you suddenly feel that all of these, my little refuges, are meaningless. And something that happens with practice is that, in tantric yoga, the main practice is guru yoga, tantric guru yoga. But this also changes, like a very basic thing in Buddhism, like in Christianity, people take refuge in God and Jesus, Mother Mary. In Buddhism, we have the triple refuge, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. But Buddha, Dharma, Sangha are in us. So the process forces us, if we are engaged with it, if we really pursue the practice, it forces us to realize that ourselves, we are the refuge. And we cannot keep taking it. Like the farther you go in the process of turning poisons into wisdoms is that you cannot do the practice like, oh, this klesha of whatever is coming up and it's so fucking painful. Guru Rinpoche, Guru, please support me now. Buddha Dharma Sangha, please help me. That is fine if you are early on the path. You know, I've also had those moments when I didn't have strong enough legs of my own to deal with the situation or the problem, so I turned to help. That is a different thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about further later on the path where the process forces you to realize that you need to take refuge in yourself, which is what Guru, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha is. So, yeah, all these things that we want to avoid, keep a distance, all these things that we want to keep close, you know, whatever it is, in our daily life, in our daily life, it all becomes illuminated. And if you are still engaged with the process, those things will get released. And then you feel much better, frictionless. And then again, you get to enjoy things. When you are free of the five poisons, oh my God, you know, we just went to Thailand with Rani. We returned a week ago, and oh, the taste of mangoes, the taste
Yeah.
of delicious taste of meals. I mean, I have to say that, like, even restaurant meals in Thailand are better than here in Slovenia, even though they are good here as well. But I'm saying that see, those simple pleasures, when you don't have the filters anymore, it's literally like living in heaven, in Pure
Mm.
Land. It's literally that. Or sipping tea like you do every day. You just it's as if there was more taste to things, more feel to things. And you notice that because you are present, fully present. Not just little present with all these thoughts and hassle of the mind happening at the same time, noticing, oh yes, that's really good tea, blah, 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 blah. No, you are fully present to things, all things. So it's lovely. It's a lovely experience. Same thing when making love, same thing when talking to my kids, same thing when talking to anybody. Like I used the example of the waiter at the cafe yesterday. It's so simple. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if I'm thinking about the difficulties that I'm experiencing in my daily life or my practice, the sense that this weight comes on you and these difficult emotions, but it's very physical, and it's almost like something that you can't escape it. Um, when it gets quite intense, it almost feels like a heat rash in your whole experience. Um, and you feel drawn to the cup of coffee in the morning, like you're desperate for it. These types of things, but then once it lifts, I get the sense that there's this calmness that you don't have to generate. The point I was pointing to there was that one way to that we use to open ourselves out and to sort of cut through these states, these heavy states that we get into, is dancing. So you put some music on and you shake yourself loose, and these types of things can help. So there's always this trying to work with your states, but now I get the sense that there isn't that anymore.
Yeah, not anymore. But something that is really important is that, we use many techniques and practices in Amrita Mandala, and in general that is true to all tantric methods. So when I said that at some point, I would say at a mature stage of the practice, all these little things, the process forces us to see our attachment to those things. But that doesn't mean Tantra is not a path of renunciation where I am attached to the cup of coffee in the morning, therefore I will renounce it, I will not drink anymore. No, the Tantra does the opposite. You throw yourself into all those experiences, cup of coffee, sex, meal in your favorite restaurant, all of that. And the way how to do that is to throw yourself completely into the experience. So not only that I am lifting my tea and I am mindful of the tea. No, even cutting through that process of being mindful. When I teach, I often say that, or teachers in general say that, just drop everything. Let energy flow freely. Don't hold on to whatever pleasant sensation or experience. Throw yourself completely into it. Whether it's a pleasant or unpleasant sensation, completely surrender, completely open up, and stay that way. Stay without attachment and aversion. So that's the way how to. It's not really a tantric instruction, is it? But it's one of those instructions that if we do it that way, it keeps cutting through our habits and patterns. Those habits and patterns of selfishness, preference, And this is necessary to do. In that sense, living our life, going through our daily experiences, figuratively speaking, naked. Yeah.
So, what is the difference in our approach? So, obviously, with the causal path, we've got dynamic concentration and cutting through practices. And then in the astral path, we've got paravasta, E, where we put pressure on the system so that we don't. The important part is that we don't sort of remain in these high elevated states, but that we cut through them to the clear nature of astral and meridians. And so, can you describe what is the essential element in terms of Amrita Mandala of how we do this in such an effective way? And were there any sort of final discoveries that you came across towards the end of the path?
In the context of astral body.
Mm.
Yes, so basically, when, and this actually applies not only to Buddhism, but also to Hinduism. Hinduism has 3 or 4 or 5 basic yogas. There is Jnana Yoga. Jnana is short, that Sanskrit term jnana, which means wisdom. It's a short for pragyana. That's where the term pragya, or wisdom, that is used in Buddhism comes from. So Jnana Yoga of Hinduism and pragya, wisdom, emptiness, that whole insight thing, they come from the same root. Why? Because that's the way to bring jnana in the place of ajnana, ignorance, to bring wisdom in place of pragya, in place of avidya. That's the way how to illuminate the subtlest of our subtle bodies. Call it what you will. So that's a principle. There's a yoga related to it, but it's a principle, right? So that's one. And in Buddhism, the exercise that we do for this illumination is vipassana. Vipassana can be practiced in sutra style, where you directly engage with your mind, just one thought after the other, one emotion after the other, one reaction after the other. That's sutra vipassana. Or it can be exercised as tantric vipassana, where you practice guru yoga, where you practice deities, where you do some channel practices, where you work with centers, where you work with mantras. So there is two different styles, sutra vipassana, tantra vipassana. There is even chokchen vipassana, but it's a bit different in the sense because chokchen or mahasandhi, which is again a classical yoga. This is not something that was invented in Tibet. Okay, so the Chokchen take of this would be to take the view from the mountain top, figuratively speaking, from the absolute perspective, and then just as things arise, when a gradualist says that when delusions arise, whatever arises in that natural state, in that absolute recognition, you just perceive them as being part of the natural state, the absolute flowering. So you try to see, attempt to see that everything is expression of the natural state, and therefore already perfect as it is, as it happens. But my point is that there is this vipassana, jnana yoga, pragya yoga, wisdom emptiness. And then the other, in Hinduism, it's called bhakti yoga. And when I say bhakti yoga, people associate with like a excited Hare Krishna chanting. But actually, Bhakti Yoga, if you look at Bhakti Yoga scriptures, you can find out that it has a lot of depth. It's not only throwing your hands in the air and singing Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. However great that might be for some time for somebody. So, but again, if we look at this from the perspective of principles, Bhakti Yoga, which is based on the pure emotion of love and devotion, when we start working with love, like loving kindness, we start feeling, the feeling of it is very visceral, much more physical than with insight practice, jnana, pragya practice. So this means that the process of Bhakti Yoga works with something that is much more visceral, much more physical. And to kind of connect the line properly, we are talking about what in Amrita Mandala we call the path of healing and light, where love, happiness are the main ingredients. Main ingredients. So we generate love, we generate in different ways, we generate happiness, we generate joy, like dancing, singing, all of this to heal ourselves, but also to reveal the love, joy, happiness that is inherently in us, spontaneously, already there. But to come back to Buddhist yogas, so Buddhism has two basic yogas. One is vipassana, the other one is shamatha. Shamatha. Shamatha is, shamatha, the term implies to establish balance. Instead of having unbalance or having balance, having smooth experience. Samatha is translated often as calm abiding, abiding in calm, which suggests peacefulness. And sometimes it is mistakenly translated as concentration practices. But no, it is not concentration practice. Concentration is something that mindfulness, those who don't use path of awareness but path of mindfulness, these are two different paradigms. But those who are engaged with the path of mindfulness, they use concentration as a tool to establish calm abiding, to bring, you could say, generate calm abiding. But the real purpose of shamatha meditation is to pacify the four kleshas, those that cause all kinds of disturbances in the body. So this is something that I have sometimes mentioned, that I think that shamatha is wrongly presented most of the time, because teachers say that it's concentration practice, where the purpose is just to stay concentrated. It is a completely insufficient presentation of shamatha. I think that shamatha, if it was taught as a healing practice, would be way more beneficial to countless practitioners who practice shamatha than just developing concentration. My point is that there are the universal principles that come from the subtle bodies that you and me and every human being has. Everybody, all practitioners, whether they know it or not, they have the same subtle bodies. They have exactly the same channels, chakras, they have the same bhumi pillar, like we have the same physical organs. We all are built the same way. But this kind of foundational understanding of underlying principles, you don't really hear about this. You are just given this or that exercises and do it for 12 years and some will come out of it. Yeah. What was your question again, to remind me?
Well, yeah, to work towards what is the crucial element that we've discovered on our path to finish this. And if we're thinking in particular terms about like a particular knot that's clearly our central knot, how would we work with that knot, or how did you work with this tailbone knot to finish the issue?
There was no such one particular thing. It was a number of things. Maybe that was the thing, that it was a number of things that when they come together, it creates like a environment where healing of the trauma can happen, but also where something that wasn't mentioned in this discussion is that there are two aspects to subtle body practice, astral body practice. So one is the bringing awareness to selfishness, which and or bringing awareness to trauma, and the other one is activating the subtle body. This wasn't mentioned yet, activation of the subtle body. So when we have astral body, which means meridian channels inside the body space, that body space filled with these meridians, there is trauma and or selfishness to remove from there, but there is also activation of the channels that are in passive state. And there we have number of different practices, like tantric practices, from Amrita Kriya Yoga and all kinds of practices that I've taught, some of you that you mentioned, that are for that purpose. So those two things, very important to understand. And coming back to that, what I said about traditional Hindu yogas and shamatha and vipassana, these principles are there. But it's difficult to find a teacher and a method that would kind of make it work for practitioners. This is the challenge. This is the present, like a corrupted state of yoga and systems of yoga. But yeah, it wasn't. It was a number of things coming together that created like a environment for the four poisons to turn into four wisdoms, together with the ignorance that in my case was already turned into wisdom 5 years ago. Number of things coming together.
Was there anything different in your experience in those last few weeks in retrospect? So you've mentioned that there wasn't too much change throughout the time, apart from in retrospect you've recognized some almost like positive qualities coming up that were a subtle sense that something was about to happen.
Well, there was like half a year before the final cessation of the astral body, I noticed that there was a little bit of spontaneous joy and spontaneous humor, spontaneous happening in me that hadn't been there for a decade at least. So little bit of that was there, and it was there without doing anything. But it was so little, and the trauma had such a big grasp of me still, that I couldn't draw the conclusion that, okay, something might be happening soon. I couldn't possibly draw that conclusion because the trauma still has had such a stronghold. So other than that, I really had no clue that it was coming.
So this is almost a surprising aspect of it, because in the causal body, it's really
Yeah,
clear that things get clearer and clearer. Even if you couldn't keep track of the boomies, there's some sense that, oh, okay, like things have almost gone beyond the head, and I've got clarity around my body, and everything just gradually gets clearer and clearer. It's difficult to know what this clearer means until you get there, but that's how it feels.
yes,
But with so if I think of my practice, there's in a sense there's a lot of density going on that maintains itself all the way through, but you just have these little shifts in different knots, etc. But there is for me a sense that there is some sort of realization. It's experienced as realization in the astral body, where you're putting your awareness into the actual astral body. There's the trauma roots, etc., which start to release themselves, and as they release themselves or unwind, there's almost this sense that you can feel them peeling off, and like there's less stuff in the middle anymore, and it's like these awareness tentacles open out into the world, and you start feeling more a part of the world, or this separation starts to reduce with the causal body, not sorry, with the astral body, not just with the awareness of the mind.
yes, that is true. I definitely experienced that I noticed over time as I kept doing my tantric practice with mantras, guru yogas, deity yogas in the subtle body. I noticed that I mentioned earlier that there is this main trauma knot and it has impact. It's kind of connected with many other channels throughout the body. And I started noticing that grip of the trauma on the channels became less and less. Like the astral body started opening up, coming back to their natural state, natural condition. But even having said that, it wasn't apparent to me at all, because once again the negativity was there. So these kind of signs were there, but there was also the negativity that was had a very big role in my mind, very big impact.
A way to describe my experience, have you ever seen Back to the Future, where he's got the picture of his family and him, and he's watching as the story unfolds, and he thinks he's going to be wiped out from existence. He starts to see the pictures disappear, and all there is left is just the trees behind and whatnot. Almost feels like, in a way, the body begins to disappear. But there is that confusing element that, there's just still this real big contraction of negativity, which is a very visceral and felt sense, and it's confusing because it feels like there must have to be a big leap from here to enlightenment, but it sounds like eventually there's just a point where it just ceases to be anymore, and then you can just enjoy being you. There's just the natural expression of you after that.
Yes, and this brings us to something interesting, something that clicks with me. I remember a few years ago I heard of Dolpopa. Dolpopa is a Tibetan master yogi. He was very fat, even fatter than I am, like much fatter. And Dolpopa, he lived many hundred years ago, and he was one of the masters of the Jonang school. Jonang, Jonang. And a few years ago I heard about his view of Buddha nature, or Tathagata Garbha, like it's called in Sanskrit. And I immediately resonated with it, recognized that, oh, this is his view. Is like his view. He said that after emptiness, post emptiness realization, this Buddha nature and flowering of all positive qualities, you start to gradually perceive it. Again, if you are post emptiness, you have only removed one klesha. But after that, when you purify the rest of the four kleshas, gradually you start seeing this Tathagata Garbha, this Kuntuzangpo, Samantabhadra, all goodness, basic goodness that radiates, spontaneously radiates all these positive qualities, natural qualities. I think natural would be actually more accurate term than positive. But so his interpretation of this was that it is this radiance of all positive qualities which is Atman, self, true self. And the reason why Dolpopa and his school, Jonang school, has been banned and persecuted by other Buddhists is because he actually used the term Atman, which is a Hindu term for true self. So most Buddhists are occupied with realizing this emptiness, or it's called no self, literal translation of anatman. Emptiness comes from the Sanskrit term shunyata. But Dolpopa did kind of came a full circle by saying that Okay, once you have removed the causes of delusion and you have realized this selfless clarity, which is wisdom, pragya, there is more to Buddha nature. It doesn't end there. It doesn't end with just emptiness. There is more to it. There is kind of more muscles and fat on the bones available. So he said that this natural radiation, blooming of positive qualities is the Atman, is the true self, which enraged all these other Buddhists. Jonang, this doctrine is still not hundreds and hundreds of years later. It's not accepted by most Buddhists. But the way I see this, it's a perfect presentation of who we are. Like forgetting doctrines and debates, forgetting fancy philosophies, the way how we are, you and I and everybody else, is like this. And for me, it kind of falls short if we just say that this radiation of positivity it's just emptiness, emptiness. What is that word? Expressing itself like that. It falls short. It falls short. So I think that it is definitely this Atman, our true self. So this is something that I have taught over the last few years, this Dolpopa's view, which I agree with fully. And there are some specific teachings we have related to this pure psyche teachings, which kind of takes Dolpopa's view and puts a spin on it. So pure psyche. So kind of like a modern, in the light of modern psychology, it ties it back to our understanding of human psychology. That there is this true self means pure psyche. But like we already discussed, as far as I'm aware, there are no psychologists or psychotherapists who speak about this because they don't have the tools to heal complex traumas.
So would you describe it like the causal is our perception, our mind of emptiness, and then there's the lens of the psyche. So we have the lens of identification that we perceive the world through, which includes our thoughts and our emotions, etc. So now the psyche is pure. We're perceiving in a pure way. We're seeing through the expression is now pure. Then there is the physical body. So as far as I understand, the two subtle bodies is the full enlightenment because this is our realization through the subtle bodies. But there's still the traumas that are rooted in the physical tissues of the body. And so this is what's left to work through.
Yes, but this is kind of, you could say, optional. So Mahayana Buddhism speak of this theory of three bodies, trikaya, and it means that we have the Dharmakaya, which is the causal body realization. We have Sambhogakaya. The main seat of Dharmakaya is in the head. That's why, we speak of clarity is mostly experienced in the head. Also in the rest of the body, but because head is the main seat, it's the head that gets clear. It's the head that sobers up, right? So there you have it. So Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, relating to the heart is the seat of the astral body. So Sambhogakaya, second of the three Trikaya, and the third one is Nirmanakaya. I'm pointing to my gut here. So like a physicalized realization of Buddha nature. Physicalized realization of Buddha nature. This is what the body of light is. Rainbow body, light body. So gut is the seat of this Nirmanakaya. I sometimes use the term alternatively for Nirmanakaya called Mahasukhakaya, the body of great ease. Sorry, what was the question again?
I was talking about how the realization is in the two subtle bodies, and
Right.
so now what is left to work with?
Yeah. So there is a term in traditional literature called twofold enlightenment, twofold Buddhahood. So Buddhahood that has two parts. And this suggests that, again, excuse me, again, it's mind and subtle body, or in our terminology, causal body and astral body. Nadi channels, meridian channels. Twofold. And the reason why this term twofold Buddhahood is used, because if you return both of these subtle bodies to their natural pristine condition, that's when the five Kleshas are removed and five wisdoms emerge spontaneously. So this means that you remove all causes of samsara, rebirth, karma from these two subtle bodies. And then there's an optional third fold, third part that can be those who want to pursue that. And I think that it comes naturally. Even if you don't pursue it, you don't do specific physical practices to reveal the body of light, rainbow body, it will over time kind of seep in. So, but it can be very quickly, if you have the practices, it can be very quickly, the physical body can be returned into the so-called light body, rainbow body. And what that means, again, this third fold of enlightenment, it's a very different process for people who do not have trauma and people who do. So the reason for me saying that is because if you have complex trauma and you've had it for 40 years, 50 years, however long it's been, however long it's been brooding, cooking, the astral body and its channels are so closely linked or associated with the physical cells that over time it leaves a kind of an imprint on the physical cells, fascia, the physical tissues. So this means that there are no causes of delusion. None of the five Kleshas, these causes of samsara, are stored in the physical body. None of them are stored in the physical body. What happens is that it's kind of like the trauma in the astral body, it kind of leaves a bruise on the physical cells, kind of like that. And then you use different practices to heal those bruises. But what those, figuratively speaking, bruises are, in the case of somebody who's had complex trauma, is that it's just tightly packed energy. Tightly packed energy. And when you start releasing it, no psychological maturation comes from it, no psychological insight, no emptiness insight, no kind of spiritual growth comes out of that. It is only releasing that densely packed energy. Only that. And this brings us to physical practices. So, briefly, I was speaking about Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga, classical Hindu yogas, and the third classical category is Karma Yoga, which is, when you serve others. It's an act of compassion. So you kind of have bodhicitta principle there. But then you have Raja Yoga and Hatha Yoga in Hinduism. Raja Yoga suggests internal practices, and Hatha Yoga is about physical practices. So you have yogas of the subtle bodies in Raja Yoga and physical practices in Hatha Yoga for the physical body. So you can, my understanding is that you can see exactly what the original idea of traditional Hindu yogas has been. And like I have said for many years, I think that because what happens over time inevitably, also to Amrita Mandala in the future, is that the plot is lost. Some practices are lost, and this has happened, we know, historically, to Buddhism, to Hinduism, to all systems. They lose the plot, and they lose some practices, they change things, and some practices disappear, some understandings, views disappear. So, I think that Buddha Shakyamuni took a voluntary rebirth, and his intention was to fix Hinduism, because I think that he saw what Buddha did was to give basic teachings of Dharma, spirituality, meditation, explain the basic yogas, and first and foremost, teach about insight, teach vipassana, teach emptiness. And we can see even today, because Buddhism became its own thing rather than it fixed Hinduism, we can see this exact problem in Hinduism still. So, things don't really work out as intended.
Yeah. So then we get the problem on the other side, where the Buddhists miss this whole section of the practices. So the Hindus still get this side wrong, and the Buddhists still get this side wrong, and
Yes.
then we get problems on both of the folds of the path.
Yeah. This is exactly the problem, and I've talked about this matter for years and years and years. Fortunately, some listen, but people, when you say things like that, they take it very personally. They think that they are, they get offended by it. But it's not that. It's believe it or not, it's my genuine concern for the spiritual well-being of people who are living here now and people of the future. Because once again, like has been said by so many masters, we have Buddha inside us. We have that enlightened nature, call it what you will, inside us. But methods fail us. So this whole view that Buddhas or fully enlightened beings, Mahasiddhas, are so rare because it's so difficult, or for whatever reason, that's completely wrong view. The problem is in the fact that methods and teachers fail us because they don't know how to teach, they don't know how to guide, they might not even be available for their students. Very common problem these days. And then this whole promise of attaining enlightenment, Buddhahood in this lifetime, single lifetime, it becomes this weird thing that doesn't have any meaning, doesn't have any validity in real life. And it shouldn't be like that. I mean, seriously, it is not that difficult. It took me 23 years of practice, but it took me that long, because I first spent many years in Zen Buddhism, learning about the failings of traditional methods. And then I had to put together a method to my students, to people of our time, that they could use to attain Buddhahood. So it took me that long because I had this other task. I wasn't only focusing on my own practice, but looking at Kripa's and Sanghita's examples, whose interviews will come in this same series that we have now started. For Sanghita, it took 10 years. Having a family, having children, going to work every day, it took 10 years. She never did extensive retreats, but she did lots of short retreats. Same thing with Kripa, but Kripa has practiced for 6 years. The whole thing, there is the so-called Lama retreat in Tibetan Buddhism, which lasts 3 years, 3 months, 3 days. You know where that 333 comes from originally? It comes from multiple texts that say that it is possible to attain Buddhahood in 3 years, 3 months, 3 days. How many of those who do Lama retreats graduate as enlightened Buddhas? How many of those who do 10 years of retreats graduate? Again, I'm not pointing at the faults of others. I'm just expressing genuine concern that, let's think about this for a moment. Let's think about this, Hello, is anybody listening? Is anybody paying any attention to how one's experience of having practiced 5, 10, 20, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, have you really thought about this? Like, how does this relate to what the texts say? What many masters say? And extremely few are paying attention. And so I've simply done my best, and I've been successful in putting together this method of enlightenment. And again, like Shakyamuni Buddha said, never believe. I am not saying things that anybody has to believe, but believe it or not, I have genuine concern for spiritual well-being of humanity, spiritual well-being of humanity in future. So this is why I have done what I have done. People can think whatever they think about it, but the results are there. Yeah. So I don't know how I got here from when I was talking about the threefold enlightenment.
I think I led you there somehow. If I talk about my experience of the early stages of awakening, because I see some people, they reach a particular level and kind of they think they're done. So to me, this was actually the real benefit of having complex trauma, that there was openings going on, and my perception was getting clearer and broader, and this was obvious. Yet there was still so much suffering going on in my system, and a lot of confusion. Well, how can this lead to the enlightenment? So it's actually pretty good from my perspective that I've done it this way round, the emptiness path, and now working with the psyche, because you can't rest on your laurels. You have to keep going to work through this stuff. So there's the other side where there's example in of many Hindus who worked with the psyche side of things first, the astral body, and even purified their astral body, but they may have only had one or two awakenings, but they don't necessarily understand that this path of
Yeah.
self-based delusion has been finished yet. There can be these stages, like we talk of the sixth bhumi, where there's a paradigm shift, and if you've purified the body, the astral body as well, things could feel very clear, and kind of your trauma and your suffering has pretty much stopped. But there's this other stuff that isn't clear unless you work with things in a particular way or can understand the subtle body extends beyond this physical body.
Yeah. Yeah, it is again. So, Tantric Guru Yoga is the single most important practice in Tantric methods. This is widely practiced, like inviting the blessings of Padmasambhava, Yeshe. On the Hindu side, inviting the blessings of Krishna, Radha, Babaji, Agastya, Mataji, these famous gurus. Even in Christianity, loads of people pray to Jesus, who attained full rainbow body, full light body. But what people don't realize, there are countless people who do these practices, and they receive their blessings, they feel them too. In one degree or the other, they get psychological and spiritual benefits, their mind becomes clearer, their energy becomes softer, and so on and so on. Countless people do these practices. But what they don't realize is that from a bit more technical perspective, in every Guru Yoga session, the master, the Mahasiddha, assuming that we are talking about a real Mahasiddha like the mentioned ones, they are showing us what the standard for full enlightenment is. Standard. And this is also something that I have spoken for years, that people have no idea that there is a standard. And this has, again, traditions and systems, they get diluted and meanings get muddied over time, just like the 10 bhumis in Buddhism. It's a jungle, to find a meaning in there's a 10 boom explanation of 10 bhumis in Avatamsaka Sutra, for example. It's a jungle, try to find what it really means. Good luck. But having said that, there are standards, but one thing that I kind of just recently realized is that people don't meditate that much. So even if somebody says that I've been practicing this or that system for 20 or 30 years, they might not be actually meditating, sitting, tuning in with what they feel that much. So there are standards, and they are actually everywhere if you start paying attention to it. And this is something that I have paid attention, and my gurus have given me precise tools, like the 13 bhumi model, how one can see exactly, use it as a path map to see exactly where you are on the map, or even if you still aren't on the map. So these are real things. So many scriptures and masters speak about sudden enlightenment and gradual enlightenment. But these are real things for us actual people. So these are not some fairy tales. But one thing that has been lost over time is a path map related to people's actual experience. So these are completely disconnected in the world today, completely disconnected. So people, when they are engaged with some practices, might be for many, many years, and they are studying with somebody, like this is a common problem, common thing, let's say, in Tibetan Buddhism, where lamas and rinpoches just have way too much, they are presented in this strange, like royalty-like light, that they are somehow above people on their golden thrones or whatever. I mean, the thrones are beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it's just that there's this very strange spirit in the world of Dharma these days. And this, exactly this thing has been discussed centuries before by different adepts and yogis and masters. They have said exactly the same thing about fame and money and power, and which is samsara. So the path maps and people's practice being completely disconnected leads to the present situation where people don't know where they are. They might have, like you said, that they might have gotten to a degree, a certain intermediate point in their causal body practice, wisdom, emptiness practice, and then done some subtle body purification, or they might have some, usually in Hinduism, for example, if you have purified your astral body, you are immediately given like a high position in many systems. You are immediately considered like an enlightened master. So many in Hinduism, many gurus have a pure astral body and pure physical body, but very little advancement in causal body side of things. So again, this is just not having clear standards. The standards have been forgotten, but they are there. They are all over the place. If you really meditate a lot, like you don't have to believe a word I'm saying, but if you start tuning in with Padmasambhava and compare his presence with some other gurus and do that for 5,000 sessions, the standards will become very clear. But if you only hang out with Tulku Rinpoche X, who is haven't done much meditation training, has went through the monastic training system, and that's the fellow who you're practicing with. That's the guy who is giving you empowerments and teachings, and that's the guy who you look up to. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't respect this whoever teacher who you're practicing with. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that let's be real about these things. Because at the same time, we were just talking about on the last retreat last weekend, we had a weekend retreat, and I remembered a quote from Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, he passed away in 1996, is one of the most respected Tibetan lamas of our time, and he said along the lines that people, enlightenment is not a fairy tale. It is not some made-up story. I have met many people, men and women, who have actually reached enlightenment. So this is not some fairy tale, this is not some imagination, it is real. That's what he said. Just like what I'm saying. But I've seen it so many times that when I'm saying it, and it's not some famous Tibetan Tulku Rinpoche, people get very angry and upset. Well, it's their problem. It's not a problem for me. But There are standards. This is a real thing, real art with real results.
So it can look and feel probably pretty good when someone has, for example, purified the astral body.
Yeah.
It's a pretty significant um, attainment, as it were. But there's a significant difference between that and the Enlightenment.
Yes.
And there's a significant difference for the benefit that you have for beings, even if we talk in the long run, because when you die, you don't get pulled back in the wheel of samsara. You're available to all beings.
You know, it is very simple when we speak of arhats, you know, stream enterers, arhats, bodhisattvas. There are basically only two categories. Buddhist cosmology gives six categories of sentient beings, and then Buddhas who are outside of it, or who can choose to be inside of it, but they are different from everybody around them. But if we are really, if we look at this from a different perspective, there are only two categories. There are sentient beings and Buddhas. You're either fully enlightened or you aren't. You have either turned all poisons into wisdoms or you haven't. So there is definitely lots of confusion about this. And I have seen this. I was one example is that I was once associated with this Indian yogi who had pure astral body and pure physical body, and I didn't know how to read these things back then, but I have later understood. But he only had, I think, two bhumis open, and he was highly regarded. Like he was a lineage holder of multiple lineages, tantric lineages and kriya yoga lineage. And the reason why I didn't want to stay with him was because he was there was something dodgy with his ethics, and he was saying kind of giving predictions and saying things that like he implied that he could clairvoyantly perceive when I couldn't or others couldn't. So long story short, I've had the experience with that gentleman how the klesha, avidya klesha, the poison of ignorance, what it can do even if your
Mm.
astral body and physical body rest in their natural state. So it keeps cooking, it keeps cooking, it keeps giving birth to all kinds of confusions and even strange things. So you're either a Buddha or you aren't. There's lots of confusion about this. But people really need to hear and understand that Buddhahood in this life is an actual possibility. But for that to take place, you do need a method that is really tested, that it really works and delivers. And it would be immensely helpful to have a Sangha that supports with this your efforts, and to have a teacher who knows how to guide you through it. Yeah.
So then there's this final stage, which you suggest is optional. Um, but I would consider that it's probably pretty useful for other people, right? Just because, um, like your energy is fully available. if people are ready to perceive that. But when you've purified the physical body, and I'm guessing, especially if you've had complex trauma and it's very dense, the energy, that it becomes very obvious once you've visually it becomes obvious once you've purified the body. And your plan is to finish this physical body path.
Yeah, it's so easy now. When the five poisons are out of the picture and trauma is out of the picture, it is so easy now. I still practice every day, like few hours or so, do formal practice, but it's so easy now, like to open that tightly packed energy from the physical tissues. It's so easy and
All
it's so
right.
pleasant.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, yeah, it's lovely. Um, um, yeah, I remember. So I met Ammachi 23 years ago the first time, and I remember seeing her for first several years. Like I didn't get awakened, my first awakening until 2011. So that's like 8 years after first seeing her, and I saw her multiple times before my first awakening. But still, after my first awakening, it felt like, holy shit, the difference between her and me. I was looking at her in front of me, like in programs in her ashram. It felt like, oh, it's like a different world, man. And I remember looking at her so many times in programs that looking at her and looking at people around her, it felt like she had different contrast to her physical body. It looked like she was kind of copy pasted into the image, and people were in their this means that people were in their samsaric energies, but her, she's a mahasiddha, pure causal body, astral body, physical body, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards. So I remember looking at her like, what the fuck is that? And I had actually experienced it in my Zen days in Japan when I met Tangen Roshi,
Yeah.
which I'm extremely grateful for having met him and talked with him privately a few times. But yeah, it felt like connecting the physical body, revealing the body of light. I remember already in the late 90s when I wasn't even a practitioner yet, and I read I think it was from the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, where I read about the rainbow body the first time. And when I saw the term there, it just jumped from the page, and I knew that I wanted that. But I had no idea what it is and how to. But revealing the body of light, it's actually very simple. There's lots of different dogmas about this, but it's actually very simple. Some say that you have to be a vegetarian and you have to do extensive fasting, and you have to abstain from sex and ejaculation, and you have to eat herbs, and you have to transform the physical tissues. No, none of that, in my experience, is true. None of those are like requirements. So I've made this joke over the years that, well, I think it's possible to attain the body of light if you drink Coca-Cola and eat hamburgers.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. And of course, health is one thing, but what the body of light is that it simply doesn't have the impact that the astral body with its selfishness or trauma had over the years. It just doesn't have those. And as you have the two subtle bodies in their pristine condition, the physical body just merges as a third part of that continuum, and it becomes like a whole,
Yeah.
WHOL, whole. It becomes like a whole system, integrated system that radiates this basic goodness, this pure light, spiritual light, clear light. That's what it is. And it doesn't, like, I've had cessations of the physical body too over the years, where this trikaya, this threefold enlightenment, also known as rainbow body, it momentarily shows up. It has nothing to do whether you're a vegetarian or eat meat, or if you have fasted, or if you have abstained or abstained from sex, or if you are having sex. Has absolutely nothing to do with that. Of course, health is one thing. I think it might be difficult, if you, I don't know if it's possible if somebody is severely ill. I don't know if it's possible to reveal it, maybe, or maybe not. But of course, if you're very ill, then it also means that you have very low life energy. If you have very low vitality, then you don't have energy to do practice. So that might be a problem. That might prevent one from revealing the body of light. But otherwise, and this is very important message that you can see in the life of Padmasambhava and many other masters, tantrics, that this is possible for householders. Jesus was a householder. He had a girlfriend, a spouse, and so many other tantrics. So this is not something that belongs to a time far removed from ours, or this is about my life, your life, listener's life. This is not a fairy tale. Although the term rainbow body, body of light, it sounds very high flying, but what it actually means is just the continuum of the three bodies, the three kaya. The three bodies return to their natural condition. That's it. And then you are nothing but a living blessing. You are nothing but a source of light. And this is what we are. This is what, when we say that there is Christ within us, Buddha within us, that's what it means. You just bring it out. And it's not really, there's nothing special in that. But also it is unusual in the world of samsara, because so few attain it. But I think that from our time to the future, there will be much more men and women like you and me, our friends, our Sangha members who are ordinary lay people. There will be much more individuals that attain rainbow body, full rainbow body, the body of light, than there ever has been in history. So, and there are predictions, kind of different types of predictions that have been mentioned in different Dharma traditions, tantric traditions about this. I don't really think that much of predictions, but if there is a way to attain it, of course people will attain it. And they should.
So this is drawing to an end now. This is the significant hurdle in the West. We have such a distance, it seems, to what the actual path is, and this idea that it's so high and lofty.
Mm.
So you've been talking about standards and these lack of standards that we keep hitting upon. So this is why so few in the world, it seems, are enlightened, let alone in the West. But we have an opportunity here, and at least we've validated it to ourselves in the Sangha that we have two ordinary laywomen who've finished the path now, which is a beautiful thing. It shows that the path can be practiced, can be learned and practiced, and the fruits delivered to people living their ordinary busy lives. So the final question, what does this mean for the pragmatic Dharma and the future of it?
We will have to see what it means. Because the thing is that um, um, there is something called merit, punya, merit discussed in Dharma. That we need to have merit. I translate merit as readiness and or willingness to practice. Readiness to practice the Dharma means that we first start listening. And when we listen, that means that we pay attention to what we hear. Lots of people practice the Dharma, but they lack merit. They are not listening and they are not hearing. So, this is kind of a bit difficult for me to answer this question because I've had so much problems with delivering my message. Our podcast is not listened by that many people. This podcast. So, but there has been, well, what can I say really? Those who listen will be able to hear what is communicated. So that's one thing. And then I think that anybody who speaks with authenticity, those who are listening can feel it. Not only hear it and think about it, but they can feel it. But if you're not listening like openly, your mind is not open, even if the right things are said, you will miss it. I mean, there are historical accounts of people who came to meet Buddha Shakyamuni, and Buddha Shakyamuni talked to them. They were listening with their ears, but they were not really listening to his energy, his message. And they said that, well, fuck this is a crazy guy. Same has happened with many Mahasiddhas through the history. We have actual accounts of this happening. Somebody comes and meets somebody like Dudjom Lingpa. Dudjom Lingpa was a Tibetan Terton who passed away in 1904, so quite recent. And there were people who, he was a living Buddha, he was a Mahasiddha. But some people thought, who came to meet him, thought that, I'm out of here. Right? So, this meaning of merit, if you have a real need to awaken, to become enlightened, this need, thirst for truth, will guide you. This thirst for truth is coming from your true self, your soul, the Buddha within. But if you don't really have that, you're in it for other reasons, you will go, Buddha Shakyamuni, what a fucking bozo. Dudjom Lingpa, what a joke, right? So it depends. And there are lots of people like this who are practitioners of Dharma, who are students of Dharma, who are exactly like this. So pick and choose. Pick and choose. But, future of pragmatic Dharma. I don't know if there is future for pragmatic Dharma. I'm very concerned about this. We can see from my favorite example of pragmatic Dharma in ancient times are ancient and to modern age are the testimonies of so many masters who have attained Buddhahood, and they have said that this is something I have attained. Guru Rinpoche was one, Buddha Shakyamuni was one. I mentioned Garchen Rinpoche earlier, he said it, that he's finished his practice and that he don't need to worry about anymore. He can die joyfully. So many masters have said that. I have these quotes and where they are from different scriptures, I have them in my books. But nowadays you can just use AI and quickly find those quotes. But so even if pragmatic Dharma was clearly practiced by so many Mahasiddhas in the past, we don't have culture of pragmatic Dharma. So coming back to pragmatic Dharma, what it means, this has been discussed in our previous episodes on this podcast. And the main features of pragmatic Dharma is openly talking about our experiences. So there are so many, there's like this whole camp of teachers who say that it is detrimental to speak of your experiences and that it will shorten your lifespan. Oh, fuck that. It's complete nonsense. It's not true. And even if it was true, like who knows when you're gonna die? Some Mahasiddhas die when they're 50 years old. Some even younger. So what is this, again, this kind of this weird, like manipulative pressure, this your lifespan will shorten if you say anything about your experiences. I think it's total horseshit. So, like I have said many times over the years, that I think that Dharma is just like any skill or art. And when you are learning, you go to school to learn mathematics, biology, reading, writing. It's openly discussed about. The teacher talks about it, gives lessons for the whole class, for the kids, and then people, they speak about it. They play ping pong with the information that is given. Exactly same is true. My experience of Dharma is exactly the same. That if you speak about your experiences, you talk about the meaning of emptiness, you talk about the instructions that we're giving, you clarify all these things, it benefits everybody. So this is the main feature of pragmatic Dharma. And it's completely dogmatic Dharma that is the prevalent way the Dharma is taught. Nobody speaks of these things, and it's just mind-boggling to me. Why not? Like, what the fuck, it's I don't understand it at all. I never understood it. Why you need to? I remember when I started practicing Zen, and I was like a kid, wet behind my ears, but I was so excited about this awakening. In Zen they call it Kensho or Satori. And then I went to some senior practitioners of my first Sangha and just asked that, can we talk about Kensho? Can we, like, have you had Kensho? I asked these senior practitioners, and can you tell me what it feels like? And they go pale in the face. We don't talk about such things. Don't. This is not something we. It's total bullshit. But how we do it in our Sangha, which, as far as I know, is the only pragmatic Tantric Sangha, Vajrayana Sangha existing in the whole world, we have seen over these 18 years that it is immensely helpful to have those discussions and clarification of these things. So I wish that other teachers started practicing and teaching the Dharma the same way. I wish that practitioners and teachers became much more open than they are. But then, the traditional Vajrayana thing, it threatens you with many things. Just 7-8 months ago, I joined these Dzogchen teachings of this very highly regarded young Tibetan Rinpoche, who was very close to Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche when he was a boy and so on. So like from the top, top hierarchy. And I listened to him maybe 10 hours. And I'm kidding you not, but for the 7 to 8 hours of those 10 hours, he was speaking about that if you damage the samaya, if you damage the guru-disciple relationship, you will go to hell. And you will develop all kinds of diseases and illnesses. That's all he talked about for 7-8 hours out of 10. I remember Zen Master Hakuin, who is considered the greatest Zen master of the last 500 years in Japan. He didn't have a lineage. Nobody ever transmitted lineage to him, so he was a complete bastard in terms of not having Dharma parents. But he became the greatest. And I remember his story when he was a young boy, maybe 10 years old or something like this. They went into a Buddhist temple, Nichiren temple, and there was a priest who gave a talk about all the awful things that happen in hells if you don't do the right thing, if you don't do the right thing for the Buddha, something like this. And the kid was terrified, like young Hakuin poor kid was terrified about this. It just appalls me that, of course, breaking samaya, it's a very serious thing. I know, I'm a tantric teacher. I teach Tantra, Vajrayana, I teach Dzogchen, and I know exactly about the karmic consequences when, I've had a number of students, these arrogant Westerners who forget about sincerity and honesty, and then they just break everything on their way out, instead of having manners and leaving kindly. But it is completely out of proportion to kind of scare people with these hells and Vajra hells, and you will acquire so many illnesses and rashes and your organs will fail if you fucking disobey me. It makes my gut turn. It really makes my gut turn. It's so rich from somebody who is far from enlightenment. It's so rich. There is slight truth to it, but this is how dogmatic Dharma is. So whether there will be any future for pragmatic Dharma, we'll see in a couple of 100 years. If this message is heard, anybody's welcome to try Amrita Mandala practices, but what I hope is that this whole bullshit of dogmatic Dharma out there in all the lineages, somebody takes them straightens things up in their own traditions and makes Dharma like a real environment for awakening body to happen again. That's what I really hope. So, but then again, I have no idea if there will be any future. Well, we can be sure that Nataraja in our lifetime will just keep doing what we do.
Yeah.
We'll enjoy and we will get to those fruitions, those cessations. Our Sangha will bloom. We speak of all these kind of things. One thing that people like to, when Amrita Mandala is discussed, because we are also bastards. I don't have formal approval from any Vajrayana authority. Very much like Haku in Dujam Lingpa, Buddha Shakyamuni, they didn't have either, like many others don't have. But so one thing that comes up when Amrita Mandala and my name is mentioned is that it's a cult. It's a cult. But people don't even understand what cults really are. I've been in anti-cult activism for nearly 30 years. I've studied cults and I've helped people who've come from all kinds of cults, including Buddhist cults, including Vajrayana cults. So there's lots of judgment, very little listening. But inside our Sangha, it's going really well. People can come, people can go, and if they go, nobody will follow. So I'm quite satisfied at the moment. If the Sangha stays like it is now, I have no problem with it. If it grows, I'm okay with that too. Of course, I wish that when we know that the method works and it delivers, I have specifically put it together for the modern people, city people, Westerners, Easterners, Asians, wherever they are from. I've done that purposefully for people like us. So of course I wish that people would take up the practice and see the results, because they really start coming. I'm always reminded by Mani, Amrita Mani, who's one of my ordained students, that when I published Awake book, Handbook of Awakening, many years ago, and when she was reading that book, on page 12, she had her first awakening. Like an actual shift, actual awakening. So, coming back to what Tulku Urgyen said, enlightenment is real. Turning 5 poisons into 5 wisdoms, it is real. But it just seems that every now and then people, humanity, they need to be reminded of that. And definitely because it is the nature of samsara that even Dharma methods get twisted, distorted, things are lost, things get diluted. This is the reason why Dharma methods need to be rediscovered. Yeah.
Well, there was quite a change in energy of the Sangha when you had this realization, and then it's really interesting to me that 2 students followed so soon after.
Yes. But this can happen when there is closeness between teacher and students. Like I would say that we are very close with Kripa, Sangita, Simha also, and have been for many years. We have done so many retreats together, have had so many lunches and afternoon teas that It's like, because Tantra is based on empowerment. Empowerment means that the teachers and students get directly connected energetically. So when you have a tantric sangha, it's a perfect analogy that it's like a web.
Mm.
And when the teacher is advanced or reaches enlightenment, whatever the teacher does, of course it could be in cults like dodgy things, right? But it's kind of the web, it shakes. And when something big happens, a shift happens, the web shakes more. And those
Mm.
who are closer to the teacher get the benefit of that vibrant shaking quicker. Everybody, the whole web shakes, whoever is on that web, but some people get the benefits from it more directly. That's what we are seeing.
I've certainly noticed a huge change in my practice, in the energies going on. Like the volume has been turned up.
Hmm. Yeah, 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 lovely.
Well, thank you very much, Baba, for this conversation.
My
It's
pleasure.
been great.
I already told you during our break, but I don't know if what I've said is of any use to anybody or not. But what the hell? It's hopefully.
Yeah.
So hopefully,
Hopefully people are listening
yeah.
somewhere.
All righty. Cheers.
Cheers.